Let's move on to terrorism now, because it's alive and well in our country. Virginia woman who tried to help a teen that she met online join ISIS so he could carry out a suicide bombing was sentenced today to 4.5 years in federal prison for lying to the FBI. Heather Elizabeth Kaufman pleaded guilty in February. This is Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson warning now that we face a growing threat from lone wolf terrorists.
We're very definitely in a new phase in the global terrorist threat, where the so-called lone wolf could strike at any moment.
Republican Ohio Senator Rob Portman serves on the Homeland Security Committee and is chair of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. And he's my guest in studio today on The Real Story. Great to see you, Senator.
Gretchen, good to be back.
So I want to start first with this analysis of the lone wolf. You know, Jay Johnson, I think, accurately says, yeah, we're going to have more of these attacks. But where have they been saying that over the last couple of years?
Well, first, unfortunately, I think he's right. And I think some of it is the lack of response online, particularly. We had a hearing on this last week, and we were able to see some of the social media that's being used to recruit some of these individuals. And, some of the glitz and glamour, none of which is accurate. It's all propaganda. And then you see the response from the State Department. And unfortunately, it's not too creative and not too interesting. And, we've got to be much better dealing with this lone wolf threat in many respects, but one is with social media.
But doesn't it come from the top down? We have all these police departments. Here we just have 2 more officers killed. We have all these police departments trying to combat and thwart all of these possible terror attacks, and they're doing a fantastic job. But doesn't it come from the top, the leadership of this country, to actually acknowledge what the real problem really is? Well,
first, you have to acknowledge the problem before you can solve it. And I couldn't agree with you more. And this has been one of the issues, is, somehow trying to sweep it under the rug and pretend like it's not there. But second, those local police departments need our help. They need the intelligence. They also need to come up with the best practices around the country to deal with this threat. The other threat is in some communities in this country where you have, for instance, in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, a lone wolf who was arrested, Christopher Lee Cornell, who was on his way to bomb the Capitol. But you also have a guy who returned from being trained by terrorists overseas to Columbus, Ohio, to the Somali community. And we need to work with the Somali community better, local law enforcement, but also nationally, provide them the tools they need to combat this. And by the way, the elders in that community, the leaders in that community are very interested in being helpful. But this is a problem that has to be addressed at every level. And yeah, the federal government has a big role to play here.
No doubt. Okay, as if that were not the only issue that we have to deal with. Several key players are going to be missing when President Obama holds a U.S. Gulf summit later this week. 4 rulers of the 6-nation alliance will be absent for one reason or another. Most notably, the King of Saudi Arabia, who is skipping the summit to oversee the ceasefire with Houthi rebels in Yemen. All right, so Senator, what do we make of this? The president wanted to meet with the new King of Saudi Arabia in a private meeting before this summit, and now nobody's going to show up. Is it all about Iran?
Well, that's what most of the analysis is, that these leaders are very worried about what we're doing with Iran. They're really worried about the fact that we're going to sort of not have their back after this agreement because it'll change the geopolitical landscape in the region. But I think it's bigger than that, too, Gretchen. I think it's a lack of U.S. leadership. It's us drawing a red line in Syria that they all felt strongly about, and then us not following through on it. It's us not standing up to the threat we have from Iran. And by the way, what they're really worried about is not just the nuclear weapon, but the fact that Iran is now meddling everywhere. So you look at what's happening in Yemen, example you just talked about a second ago,
right.
But also in Syria, of course, what's going on in Iraq, even what's going on in Libya now. Certainly the Israelis feel the threat. I was there. I got back a week ago from Israel.
I was just going to ask you. You met with Bibi.
Absolutely. And, they realize that it's a very perilous time over there. The Iranians are more aggressive than ever. We've seen this in, recently, them actually taking a Marshall Islands flagged ship out of the Straits of Gibraltar or the Straits of Hormuz. And, this is going to continue unless we push back. And so part of what I think these Gulf states are saying is they're looking for U.S. leadership.
Well, that June 30th deadline is looming, too, and that's when we're supposed to have some sort of an agreement with Iran. I mean, that's right around the corner. I know members of Congress want to have a say in that as well.
We sure do. I'm very concerned about the framework agreement we have, and hopefully we can give them some leverage by having a vote in Congress and seeing some of the details.
All right. Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. I worked in 2 cities there, Cincinnati and Cleveland, and my husband's from Columbus. So there you have it.
You're an honorary Buckeye.
No doubt. Senator, great to see you.
Good to see you, Gretchen.